going to get started. I'm going to turn first to Dr. Jackie Moore to open the meeting.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to move to open the and ask the clerk for a roll call.
Ms. Pekowski?
Here.
Ms. Spivey?
Here.
Mr. Barron? Here. Mr. Isley?
Here.
Mr. Martiri?
Yep.
Ms. Harris?
Here.
And Dr. Moore?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Joylyn Pruitt-Adams. I'm the superintendent here at Oak Park and River Forest High School. Before we get started, I want to establish the norms with you. You should have been able to pick up a copy of the norms on the back table, but I will send it to you now. Out of respect for everyone's time, this evening's town hall will end promptly at 9 p.m. That's why we want to get started on time. To ensure that as many attendees, as you can see, we have standing room only. As many, you usually tell jokes real good. To ensure that as many attendees as possible have an opportunity to speak, we ask that you please adhere to the following. Please step forward to the microphones. We have one on either side of the room. Each person will have 2 minutes to speak. We ask that your comments and/or your questions should pertain to board roles and responsibilities. As the superintendent, I will direct questions to the appropriate board members. All persons who wish to comment or ask a question will have a turn before anyone has already spoken is allotted an additional 2 minutes. Please be courteous. Questions or comments shouted from the audience will not be permitted. On the back table, because we want this to be as interactive as possible, you should have received a sheet that speaks to strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. Take the time to tell us what you think we do well here at Oak Park and River Forest High School District. What are some opportunities that exist that we may be missing out on? What aspirations do you have that the board can work towards to impact the lives of your students? And then the results. How will the board know it's succeeding, and what are the measures? Our goal is to, in February, have another opportunity for you to dialogue with our board, where we'll talk about what we hear you say tonight. And then in May, we'll come back and the board will share with you some of their future goals. Also on the table, you should have found a copy of the 2019-2020 goals for our Board of Education, as well as the norms that were just established for this evening's discussion. Additionally, there were index cards, because not everyone is comfortable asking questions, or sometimes before you leave, you come up with another one. So we have index cards back there for you to leave any questions. And if you are willing to put your contact information, then we can respond to you appropriately. And last but certainly not least, our strategic plan focus areas for the 2019-2020 school year are on the table in a little private. So, without further ado, the first item on our agenda is the introduction of our board members. And I'm going to ask each board member that as you introduce yourself, talk about something that you're proud of during your tenure on the board. I know we have 2 new board members. Share why you joined the board. And we'll start with our president, our vice president, our secretary, and then our newest board members, and then our other 2 board members. Dr. Moore?
We're not allowed to pass to...
Not an option.
Good evening, everyone. I am Jackie Moore. I am president of the school board, and not used to microphones like this. One thing, this is my second term on the board in my 6th year, and proudest accomplishments, I would say, have to do with our racial equity policy and the work that we've done with student leadership and bringing that voice into all of our decision-making at the school in terms of school climate and curriculum and instruction. So I'd say those are my proudest accomplishments.
Hi, I'm Sarah Spivey, Board Vice President. I have so many accomplishments that this institution has done during my time here. I don't want to take any credit for it. I just, the work gets done by people who are not necessarily me. But I want to join Jackie in what she said, but I also want to talk about our partnership with the Collaboration for Early Childhood, which I think was super forward-thinking. John Phelan, somewhere in the audience, he should get a lot of credit for that partnership. And as I've watched that evolve, I continue to be really impressed by the foresight of the folks who were able to get that intergovernmental agreement in place.
All right, I'm Mike Isley. I'm the board secretary, and was, I guess, elected about 3 years ago, give or take a little while. And I guess when I came into the board, there's a lot of objectives we have in place, all of which are important to me, but one of the things that was important to me was sort of the business areas of the school, which is how do we think about our finances and how do we plan that going forward, and how does that impact our capital budget, our ability to spend on capital projects and keep the building in good condition. I think, as Sarah said, it's hard to take credit for anything that the board does because the board does it. But one thing I know that I have pushed for, which was the creation of the Community Finance Committee, which is now in place, and we have a fantastic sounding board for some of these financial planning things of community members. Thanks.
Hi, Ralph Martiri. I'm a new board member, so no accomplishments at the board yet of which to speak. The reasons I ran for this board are pretty simple. I mean, we are at District 200 in the process of trying to change our entire system to make it one that is truly equitable and excellent. And systems change is really one of the hardest things to accomplish with an organization as large as this one. And I've worked on systems change in my private life and in my day job, and so I just wanted to help contribute to that effort here by this board and by this administration to really make that systems change lasting and something that we could all look back on in 5 or 6 or 7 years and say Oak Park River Forest High School is now the high school to emulate across the country for racial and social justice and equity within the school.
Good evening, I'm Gina Harris. I'm the only educator on this board, and that was why I ran. I ran because there wasn't a teacher voice here, and I thought it would be an important piece. But even more so, I ran because of the importance of equity and ensuring that we're making sure everyone's voice is at the table, that the people that need to be heard are being heard, and that the conversations that we have are driving us forward in a more cohesive and community-driven way. So I'm excited because it's my first year chairing the Culture, Climate, and Behavior Committee, which I'm hoping that behavior eventually falls off of that title of that committee, and we're really focusing on culture and climate versus trying to manage behavior.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Barron, and I'm in my 3rd year in the board, and I would echo a lot of what I've heard before about some of the great accomplishments of the board as a whole. One of the things that really prompted me to run was the desire for more external communications from the school to the community, and so I appreciate the board's role in the last few years of making some real strides in that area, and so including our social media, videotaping our meetings. This meeting is being videotaped as an example, and so that's one. Another is the Imagine facilities team that came together. Fred Arkin and I were the liaisons from the board to that, and so that was a privilege to be able to be part of that process and to really see what's happening in the region and some of the possibilities here. And so, if you've not yet seen the video from the last meeting, where we provide a rendering of what where we are right now will look like in a few years, it's very exciting just to see some of that starting to take shape. So, thank you all for being here.
Mr. Cobb.
Hello, Tom Kofsky. I've been on the board for, Jackie, how many, 6 years? Second term. And so you've heard some of the general, I think, overall accomplishments. The things that I look at as a board, well, I was on a finance committee before joining the school board, so that's how I kind of dipped my toe into the water. I'm proud that we've changed our philosophy as a board from tax to the max to making adjustments to what we need to support our students, but while being cognizant of our taxpayers. I'm also pleased that we brought on a key role of a board is to hire a superintendent, and so I'm pleased that we had the opportunity to hire a leader that we are proud of, that can lead us in the future. And you know, the equity work is something that, frankly, when I joined the board, I knew not much about, and I'm pleased to continue to learn and be exposed to the challenges we have and make sure that we put our energy and effort to it, assuring that all students can succeed.
Thank you. Before we begin our dialogue, in case you're wondering why the board is not sitting behind the massive tables that they normally sit behind, or when there's no one from administration up there, our board has a genuine, sincere desire to engage in dialogue with stakeholders. And so it was the choice to not have the tables so that it was more intimate conversation with the members of our board. I would, though, like to take a moment to recognize members of administration who are here. Raise your hand. Thank you. That's awesome. But they don't have to, there you go. But they don't have to talk tonight. So let's open this up. I'm going to ask Dr. Moore to, first of all, because a lot of people don't understand the roles and responsibilities of the members of the board. So Dr. Moore is going to share with you the roles and responsibilities of members of the board, and then we will open it up for questions and dialogue. Dr. Moore?
Thank you. First, I want to say in terms of our configuration this evening, as board president, I may have made a choice that not everyone was aware of, that we weren't going to have tables, and it was intentional to diminish that barrier of a table and the formality. But also, this is probably one of the first times in a setting like this where all of us can see each other, and I appreciate that as well. In terms of our board and the role of the board, governance is where we fall. And as Tom Kofsky mentioned, we have one employee, and that is the superintendent, and she is the director of all things district related. And so hiring a superintendent and providing oversight to ensure that the goals of the district are met is one role of the board. And actually it was interesting hearing the various comments from board members, because it touched on all of the areas. It touched on community engagement and outreach. It touched on policy development as well as policy oversight, and being intentional to communicate with our stakeholders, community stakeholders, as well as taxpayers, and our first and most sincere direction, doing what is in the best interest of our students. So that is the purview, and at times, I know it seems as though, and I've said this many times to students who ask me where my office is in the high school, and I have to tell them I don't have one, even though I am here a lot. But also, I have no control over snow days. The board doesn't. My children used to say, come on. I was like, if I were in charge, maybe there would be one. But just being clear that as a board, we adopt agreements so that we speak with one voice, and that does not mean that every vote is 7-0, but it does mean that once a vote has come about, that is the will of the board and that is how we move forward. We're also not a board that is here to provide a rubber stamp for the administration. We are here to ask questions, to learn, to challenge the administration with questions, but also to challenge each other, to learn and grow, and to listen in a way that allows us to further the strategic plan, missions of our district, always being mindful of being fiscally responsible and keeping our students at the forefront. So I would say that in a nutshell overview, that is how we try to operate.
Thank you. So now we're going to open the floor for questions and comments. There's a mic to each side of the room. Don't everybody rush. As the first person comes up, I just want to remind you that this is a dialogue between the board. Each person has 2 minutes. We would ask that if you have a second question or comment that you wait until everyone has at least had their first opportunity. The floor is open. I would ask that you say your name when you come up, and then I will direct your question to the board.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ross D'Souza. I am a parent of one current OPRF student. I have 2 more children on the way to their high school years. My child who is here is a sophomore. He's had a wonderful experience, so I thank you. He's a good kid and he's having a good time at Oak Park, so thank you for your guidance and support there. As a parent, I recently have been asked to take a survey about cell phone usage and career development, and I'm happy to do that, to be engaged and survey, answer the survey so we can be more informed. So my question to this board and the administration as well, in order to help the board understand how parents and teachers are feeling about the proposed changes to our freshman curriculum, will the board support an independent survey of all community parents that have children either coming or are currently here, and our teachers, to gauge their support or non-support of the specific curriculum change, and will you share those results with the community? I think it's really important to know where parents stand. It doesn't mean that you have to do what all parents say, but I think it's very informative to know as a board how our community feels, how our parents feel, so there can be a more robust discussion in the community.
Thank you. Dr. Moore, would you like to take the first question?
Okay, I will take the first, and please, we will make sure that my voice is not the first or the only that we're hearing. First of all, Mr. Lazuzzo, it's nice to meet you in person. And one of our goals is to be transparent and to engage with our community. You and I have had many email discussions regarding these same issues, and it is the intent of our district to get parent input, and our information meetings have been the start of that. I cannot speak to a formal survey that is being developed, but I personally wouldn't have any issue with something like that as long as it was able to capture the true full reach and broadness of our community. And that is something that could be considered. And in terms of our teachers, that would be under the purview of our district leadership. I can say now that the only way that something can be successful, like our freshman curriculum restructuring, is if we have the buy-in of our teachers. They are the driving force. They are the reason something like that will be successful. And so work is already being done, and there have been no surprise attacks or surprise approaches in terms of how we're doing things. And that's not to say that I could sit here and say 100% of our parents or 100% of our teachers are in line. We're still learning, and that is the process that we're in. So I hope that is helpful, and that, like I said, the administration would be charged with getting input from our teachers, but I know that that's already happening. and full transparency with our community of parents, that's something that we could look into.
So just so I understand, you're open to having a survey of the parent community as well as the teachers community and sharing that with the NRF community?
No, I'm not hoping, I'm saying that as we're moving along, if that is what the direction that we take, I know that that's something that you're invested in as a community member, and we're trying to figure out the best ways to ensure that we capture the voices of all of our, community members that are have students at the school.
That'd be great, thank you.
Mr. Barron, you want to also
Yeah.
respond?
I made somewhat inadvertent eye contact with Dr. Kurt Adams, but yes. But as I got the gist of what you were indicating, I'm
Dr.
like, yeah, I
Moore
can
said
talk
she
on
didn't
this.
want to be the only voice.
And good to meet you as well, and thank you for your diligence, and you've brought a lot to the table to us through emails and through your research over the last few months. And I will just say that this is going to be, this already is a journey, and I know that focus groups are part of the process, and really trying to get input and insight from people. I used to work at a survey lab, and I took a graduate level course in it. Doesn't make me an expert, it just makes me dangerous to say something stupid right now. But one thing is there's push and pull surveys, and there's also what's the nature of the survey? What are we asking? Is it for buy-in to go forward with this, or is it some subset of what are some of the biggest concerns people have? What are some areas of challenge? Whatever the case may be. And so, I think that the devil is in the details of all of that. I will say that we benefit from input from people who are maybe seen as naysayers or skeptics. We have naysayers and skeptics here as well, and so I just want you to know. And also, we have no response sometimes to your emails, or Dr. Moore has, but when we don't respond, it's not because we don't want to engage in general, it's just that it gets really messy, and it's that whole idea of not trampling over each other communication-wise. And so, I've got plenty of business cards in here that they gave me when I got on the board. I'm looking to get them out tonight, so I'll be sure to give you one. So,
I would like to comment on your comment about when you don't respond. The board president is the identified person who responds on behalf of the board. So I just wanted to echo your sentiments that when the board does not reply, it is not that they don't want to reply, it's that it has been identified that the board president is the voice and corresponding. Okay, anyone else? Just say your name.
Hi, I'm Jenna Russell, and I have a sophomore at O'Hara. Wonderful experience as well, so thank you. And I don't know if this is just anecdata, I have a sophomore who is in an honors curriculum, and I know that we're not considering it for sophomores yet, but I'd like us to also consider what this, like not just polling parents and teachers, but talking about the students, because I know my students said that if the class that she took honors, if there was not an honors option, she would have to take AP, and didn't want that kind of commitment. So she's not going to be in the right place. I also have an 8th grader who's very bright. I mean, not to be house bright. And so she comes to the high school for honors math, and isn't particularly challenged. I mean, it's a fine class, but I wonder sort of what would her experience be if there was only, like, how does somebody teach to all of those different levels, and how do we meet every child where they are? And that, at that higher level, there's sort of a special need, just as any other struggling learner, with the same risk profile of boredom or behavior, dropout. And I don't want us to lose those kids when we start to focus on what's best for everybody, to make sure that we include everybody on the continuum. But that was not my question. My question is from Kitty Conklin, because the Village of Oak Park is also meeting tonight. Everybody can't be anywhere. So it would be, are we making any changes to the swimming requirement in our curriculum for next year? I believe that was something that she had put was under advisement. Thank you.
So I'm going to first comment, I'm going to ask that Board Member Harris respond. It was about the differentiation and making sure that needs were met. Just a comment as the educator. And then Mr. Mortieri, if you'd like to also comment on that. I know I'm not supposed to speak, but all of the courses are part of the curriculum review process, which means swimming will also be reviewed.
So,
With the PE, it's part of the PE.
so there's no decision yet as to whether it will be a mandatory, the swimming will be required for the freshman and sophomore. Or freshman,
No.
okay, thank you.
Just to, as a reminder, that is not a board level,
Right,
it would
that's
come to us.
administration. That's
We
the
wouldn't have been able
board
to
answer, but I'm not going to say more.
So I'm happy to talk a little bit about the differentiation question, because in education currently, in almost every classroom that I've ever been in, there is a high level of differentiation across the classroom. So currently, in our elementary district, we have an inclusion model, so we do have students of varying levels. Each educator is versed in how to provide I can't think of the word right now, but how to provide enrichment opportunities for the students that need them, as well as opportunities for students to meet those levels who may be at a different level than some other students, right? So the work of the educators is constantly, always and ever, to make it possible and make the work accessible, and not only make it accessible to those who can't reach it, but also make enhancement opportunities available to every student. So the conversation is, as an educator, what I keep hearing the administration talk about, and what Greg, they talked about in the presentation, was about how differentiation occurs. And I think that there's a lot more education for our community and understanding what that actually really looks like. And in not our last board meeting, but the board meeting prior to that, I did say explicitly to Greg, I was like, hey, I think that because we're educators and we understand what this process looks like, if you're not in education, you haven't seen it in action. You haven't seen what it's like to have 30 students in a classroom, although we're fortunate here we don't have the same numbers. But to have to differentiate for 30 students, or 30 people in front of you at one time. So it's really important that we educate the community on what that actually looks like and how that additional reach happens for students.
With all due respect, I think we should also listen to parents and students and what their actual experience and how that is occurring, and if it is occurring at the level and to the extent that you think it is. Because I understand that I'm not an educator and I don't have the theoretical background, but I do have the practical experience of having children in the two districts of Oak Park for 10 years, and that has not been my experience as a parent of my child as a student.
I do appreciate your comment about ensuring that we're listening to the parents and the students, because it is actually one of the reasons why I ran, because my daughter was a student here, I was a student here, and my daughter also was a student in the elementary schools who was not placed into any honors courses, not even given an option for those courses. So in order for us to begin to even look at the pieces that you have a concern with, as well as the pieces that I have a concern with, I'm absolutely open for us discussing this not only with the parents, but most importantly with the students, because their experience is the most important part.
I'll just add, it's really hard to do incredibly well. And that's why throughout this process, we have to be very supportive of the administration and the faculty to provide them with the professional development and the supports they need to implement at the highest level. I mean, that's crucial. If we can't implement at the highest level, we're not accomplishing our goal. And I want to be very clear, the primary goal of an equity initiative, sure, is to eliminate these racially based distinctions in performance that are statistically meaningful. That's a primary goal. But the ultimate goal is an excellent educational opportunity for all students. So an equity initiative isn't a zero-sum game. And it is, as you said, about all the students attending our classes, right? And ensuring that their experience is as rich and as challenging and as rigorous as it needs to be for them to get what they need out of it. So that's crucial. And so I appreciate your comment on it, but you should know that's also our belief. So we are with you 100% in that way of looking at it. And I think second, if you look at a lot of the research on this, and this is a big change. So it's a challenging change for any community to get its arms around, right? What's really been interesting from the research is they have shown that heterogeneous environments, that is the ones that we are moving to, on a statistical basis, show higher performance overall for all students. And the homogeneous environments, which is the old method, had a slightly smaller academic performance overall, even for the kids in that homogeneous environment. So if we do it right, to your point, we should create this really rich environment for all of our students where everyone has that chance to excel to the maximum of their capacity. And that's what it's about.
We eliminated the pull-out model in D97, went with the inclusionary model, and I have to see that there's, and I haven't, have you seen the test scores or the measurements, that the shift year over year?
How long is, do you know how long D97 has done it? That's not
Just
enough.
1 year. So it didn't seem like the initial data from that experiment is as yet supporting.
Yeah, well,
It could come later. I don't
and to
know.
your point on that,
But
so
those kids are, you know.
there's a need, there's sort of a feel of immediacy to get things done and make a change and address our issues. The challenge is in an educational system to generally start seeing really statistically meaningful outcomes that you can measure. You're looking at a 5 to 7 year horizon, so 1 year's worth of data, interesting and you need it, but you really need to have a measurement over a longer period of time.
Remember, we have 5,000 to 7,000 students.
Right.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for the board?
Hi, Heather Chanchiello. I am a parent of a freshman here. Also, I have a 6th grader in District 97. My first suggestion to the board, whatever data that you're looking at, I already know you do not have the data on gifted education, nagc.org, and SENGifted, SENGIFTED.org are very good resources. That yes, heterogeneous grouping is very effective. It is not necessarily effective for the top learners in your populations. That's shown that some homogeneous grouping is the most effective way, otherwise they do lose learning. And I know this because I am an educator. I'm trained in differentiation. I'm trained in gifted education. I have not seen the results that District 97 promised, except that my son had to teach himself 2 years of math because differentiation in that classroom was the teacher handing them workbooks and saying, go. And I have been around as long as No Child Left Behind has been around, and you'll remember that the problem with that was we taught to getting everyone to pass, and that was it. And I would also like to say something that I don't get to say often enough. My son, who we managed to get him to skip a grade because of the Accelerated Placement Act, parents should look that up. We should make sure that we're in line with that as a board because it's the law. We managed to get him accelerated. He came to this school. We spent 4 months trying to get him an appropriate math placement here based on his abilities. And it was a fight. Now, credit to Mr. Johnson because it happened. He is the happiest he has ever been in life. And he was a kid who loved school. He has grown in ways I can't even describe compared to the way he was. Because he is in classes now at the high school. He is challenged at a level he's never been challenged at before because you have honors and you have advanced. And yet when I was trying to get him placed, I heard every myth about gifted education coming out of the mouths of department heads. I hear it from people in the audience here. My kid's not Doogie Howser, therefore my kid doesn't have special needs on the other end. These are damaging, and unless we understand them as a district, the reason we're missing our children of color, our twice exceptional children, our English language learners, and not being able to serve them on the honors and advanced level, because we don't know what we're looking for. And if you don't accept that there are learning differences, and they include those populations, statistically at the same level as white kids, you are not going to be able to fix your problem. So, reducing opportunities for the entire school to one program that's supposed to serve all kids equally is the wrong way to go about it. And I think it's really upsetting as someone who is an educator and educated in gifted education and a white person with a white kid who has time on her hands and I still had to work to get my kid properly placed, what hope does any other parent have in this district to have that for their kid? And what is okay about telling a child of color, we're doing everything we can for you with this watered down version of our curriculum. Now it's equal for you. I think that's fundamentally unfair that we're telling our kids this. It hasn't worked in District 97 yet. I'm not looking forward to sending my daughter to a district where the claim is going to be the same.
Mr. Komsky, would you like to comment?
I'm not an educator, but as I listened to what you said, I heard things about watered down, and I'm not hearing that as what we are making available. We have a curriculum that is meant to challenge all of our students and raise it up. So I don't agree in watering it down.
Is this the models curriculum where students can choose to do extra work in order to get the honors credit? Is that correct?
That's an administrative question, it's not a board question.
Okay.
And our models is in the science division. And I would suggest, since you know Mr. Johnson, maybe at another point in time.
He would love to talk to me.
Okay. I didn't.
But I think our board does need to know what it looks like, because the board is speaking to me as if my concern is not legitimate, and Mr. Kofsky, and I know your daughter is an educator, because
Yes,
she was my kids, and he loved her. So, but I'm just saying, like, if you're going to speak from a position of knowledge and tell me this is true, I know this is the problem we have in District 97. We'd like to not have it here.
I would just like to add that two of the comments that have to do with curriculum in District 200 have referenced District 97. And one of the challenges for a high school that has two elementary school districts that feed into our high school is that they are separate districts. So as much as we try to understand what's going on, we have no control over what other boards do. Now, we're working to change that and to have information. But the comment that you made about your freshmen having a good experience and getting to the point, and as someone, that's had 4 children go through this high school as well, I will say what my mom always said as an educator, it doesn't matter what school you're at, advocating for your child is going to be part of it. And I respect what you're saying about if it's this hard for me. That's one of the reasons I ran for the board. I knew my kids were going to be fine. It is about making sure that we open up all of our opportunities for all of our students. And hearing things like watered down, that has never been the goal or the direction of this board or this district. And it is about differentiation, and to Mr. Martiri's point, about doing it right. And that is why we're not jumping in and saying, okay, we decided we're doing it. That has not been how this district operates. So I would hope that as we're doing things like this, that trust is built in taking in questions and providing thoughtful answers and being able to say, I don't know when we don't, and getting back to people, because that is what is driving this process, is relying on best practices, relying on research, but also getting input from all of our stakeholders, and that is the process that we're undertaking.
May I just make a suggestion that you do need to raise the rigor of college prep at this district, in this high school. That absolutely has to happen. But to eliminate honors and advanced at the same time, which is what we were told was happening with the freshman curriculum. So if I'm going off misinformation, blame the last meeting. But I'm just saying, we referenced District 97 in an effort to tell you what did not go well, so that you don't have to repeat the mistakes. But just saying, expand the number of options. Don't reduce the number of options and rely on a single classroom format to serve all the students, because we don't ask our kids with learning disabilities to all have everything happen in the same classroom. We don't ask that. Someone with dyslexia, someone with someone who has deafness. We have a lot of different learning disabilities that are served outside of a single classroom. We need to consider that on the other end of the spectrum as well. And sometimes kids have both. Learning disabilities with giftedness. You need to be able to serve both, and having a realm of options as opposed to one single situation to serve them all in will help you better and will achieve your goals better.
I'm going to suggest that you have a time to meet with Mr. Johnson, because it is never our intent to get rid of AP. It's never our intent to get rid of honors. And our intent is to raise the level of rigor.
So let's bring 4 kids into honors and AP.
Yes. Yes, so I was, and he is open to having conversations.
Sure is.
Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia Brito. I am a parent of a junior and also of an 8th grader that's going to be in school here next year. I'm also the advisor, adult ally to a group of young organizers called the Revolutionary Oak Park Youth Action League, which is formerly the Social Justice Club from Julian. A big portion of them were the ones that walked out last year regarding a lot of different school issues that were happening here, especially as they have to do with racial justice. So what I wanted to bring up today was basically something that the youth have been talking about a lot in their meetings, which is the disciplinary issues around particularly black students in the school. I have a number of concerns. I think that the way that disciplinary issues are not only targeting black students and they're disciplined the most and mostly suspended, but it's a heavily police-style investigation that includes interrogation, like witnesses, and these last many days. So usually what happens is when there's an incident, the deans use up a lot of their time investigating these incidents as if it were a criminal justice system. And we know that this is very much in line with the school-to-prison pipeline and the different ways that they're similar and preparing the students to be in jail. There's things that happen at this high school where students are escorted around the building and constantly escorted around the building. A lot of black youth are, I would love to get the data on how many black youth actually are kicked out of the school and go to the alternative school Menta. Also, how many black students are confined to the 4th floor in this high school. Because a lot of that stuff is not talked about, but we know it's happening. I know it's happening because the youth tell me all the time. And there's many, many examples. And I think that one of the biggest things that I wanted to say to you all is that I feel like we tend to pat ourselves on the back when we get things like an equity policy passed. But I feel like if it were truly urgent, and if you all really feel that equity is important, students, especially the most marginalized students, students that don't have, you know, the privilege of having parents that are able to come to these meetings, the privilege of having parents that have flexibility in their schedules to advocate for their children during the day, they're the ones that need to be feeling the change the most. We don't need a policy to make changes. And I feel like a lot of times, you know, we're telling the students, it's okay, well, we got the equity policy passed, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, it takes time. But every day that we go by not making changes that we have the ability to make so students feel the difference, we are creating harm and we're losing those students to a system. So I know that there's going to be a couple of students from the organization that are also going to speak, but I just wanted to really bring that up. And I also think that I don't really like this. Well, actually I do. It's fine because at first I thought I was going to have 2 minutes and then you all get to respond and then I don't get to say anything else. So I hope that if there is something, you know, I'm able to respond to you all and whatever you have to offer. But again, even if whatever it is you have to offer, I just want you to know that the students are not feeling the changes. They are hurting, they are being suspended all the time, and even though we claim that we're doing restorative justice processes, it's not enough. It's very much the bare minimum, and I feel like by this point, we should have done a lot more, faster, and it's just not fast enough. Students are not feeling the changes, especially the most marginalized students.
I'm going to ask Ms. Harris and Ms. Spivey to respond.
Hi. So everything that you just spoke about is the reason that I ran for the board 4.5 years ago now. You know, I was a public defender for 15 years, so this is all very sort of near and dear to my heart, especially our students who are most marginalized. You know, and I agree, it's never fast enough and it's never soon enough. And while we feel like we're operating with urgency, an adult sense of time, I know, is not nearly the same as a student in the school for whom, you know, time goes much faster for them or much slower for them than it does for us. We have been making great strides, though, in terms of changing our culture of our school, which is a very slow process, just by the nature of institutions. Dr. Pruitt-Adams, though, has been a huge, I think, one of our huge successes, because that was really the focus of all of our interviews with her. And she knocked it out of the park in terms of every single interview that we had with her around this issue of racial equity and racial justice. And so she has also transformed our administrative team. And we have Mr. Ammons on, who is now going to be working to help make restorative justice really part of the fabric of the school, because that was one of the pieces we were missing, was somebody who could help coordinate all these initiatives. Because I agree with you, it seems like it's been piecemeal, because we have some teachers who are early adopters and really invested in it, and then we have other teachers who are not, not as aware of some of the tactics they can be using. And so now that we have somebody who can really help shepherd that change throughout our school and make it part of everything, from our lunchroom staff to our security staff to our teachers, I think that we will begin to get some of the traction that I think that we haven't had so far. I don't know if that really answers your question. I hope it does. I know Gina probably has a lot to say too, though.
It doesn't answer my question. I don't even know if it was a question. I was just trying to kind of raise awareness about what's happening as far as my relationship with the youth. I've heard everything you said before, and I disagree with you about pace. I think that, it's a huge excuse to talk about incrementalism, institution culture, but that's the reason why y'all got elected, right? So you guys can do something different and be bold, right? And so students don't have to do that for you and walk out and have to miss school. And I honestly don't understand why a lot of the student organizers aren't getting awarded and aren't getting, more positive reinforcement. As a matter of fact, student leaders in this school that don't fit this idea of a model minority oftentimes get the opposite. They get negative reinforcement. So thank you for that information. But yeah, it doesn't really.
So thank you for bringing this into our conversation, because it is an important piece. The experience of the students is the reason why we're here. And what you're saying is accurate, absolutely. I would not argue that point with you. What I would say is the sense of urgency that you feel, I don't want you to think it's not felt on this end. And there's been a lot of measures that Dr. Pruitt Adams has taken to include student voice in a lot of places so that changes can begin to happen. The urgency that's required now is an urgency of human beings. It is an urgency of the people within the system. And so I'm not going to only direct this comment to our educators that are in the field, because this is a conversation that we're having nationally. But this is a conversation to our community as well, because this piece of branded inferiority, as someone said in a PD recently, is an idea that is not coming from one place, and is a piece that we need to unpack as a community in more ways than one. And so I don't have an answer for you that's going to allow us to make the students feel better right now. I wish that I did, because I wish it was truly that simple, that there would be a couple things that we could do, and then everyone would behave differently and treat students differently. But it's going to take a lot more than that. And it's going to take a commitment from all of us here to be evaluative of how we are with people.
Mr. Eisen.
I guess I just wanted to add to that too. I mean, I also, when I ran for the board, I talked to a lot of people, and I heard many people talk like you did. And I've been on a lot of boards, and when I get there, I want to go make these changes happen right away. But actually, from the board level, that's not my tool. My tool is really to drive the structural and policy changes that align the decisions that all the administrators make to make the decisions in the right direction. I know that's not what you want to hear, and I know that's not the immediate answer, like Gina said, but these policy changes we made are really important, because I think they help us provide the guidelines for decisions now and going forward into the future, and they are the seeds of the systemic change that we need.
And I just wanted to answer to that one, because I definitely disagree with that idea of that's not your tool. It also shouldn't be the youth's responsibility to have to walk out because of all of the racial aggression that they experience in this school, having to be hospitalized for depression from having such high stress levels existing in these buildings. So I disagree. I think that We need the type of board member that's ready to be bold and that's ready to make moves. All across the country for many, many years in history, I've been on boards too, right? There is a way to be a board member and not get put into a box. You have a lot of tools available to you, including walking out, including a lot of activism and different types of things that you can do to push things forward. If you feel confined by whatever role that you're taking, that's very much your choice. But to say that we don't have choices available to us to make things, push things with urgency and put their humanity ahead of our own, I'm sorry, I just don't agree with you. I don't agree with that.
I don't think that that's what we're saying though, Ms. Brito. I think that...
I didn't disagree with you. I disagree with you.
Because I was just saying, because I don't think that, what I am not hearing from the board ever in our conversations is that we don't feel that there's a sense of urgency. Like, my experience of the members of this board is that they are willing to do what it takes so that we have a different experience for our students, to support our administration for whatever those things are that needs to happen.
And in my experience, working with this board and administrators, that has not been the case. I have, trust me, I know I'm out of time, but I have receipts, so I disagree with that too.
Just two quick comments, because I understand your sense of urgency and your focus. One request I have of you is to come to one of our Culture Climate Committee hearings and give us some positive suggestions for changes at the school that you would like to see implemented, that the board could act on, that would address the concerns you're raising in a more immediate fashion that maybe we're missing. So you may have some good ideas and you could bring them there, and that's the right forum to raise them. And there are 3 board members on that committee, and they will certainly bring it up to the board. And I'll tell you that if there's any chance of working them into the overall change, we will recommend it and let our administration take it from there. That's number 1. And then number 2, what has definitely changed, and so I'm new to this board, I've only been on it for a few months now. When, Sarah, did you form the Culture Climate Committee? Because it was your initiative 4 years ago?
It was Jeff Westglass.
So I was on the initial Culture Climate Committee, and at that committee, under the old administration, we asked some basic questions about, do you have data on this problem, that problem, what you've done to address it? And the answer is we couldn't get it for you. In the 4 years since that started, we now not only have changed policy, the prior board did that, I had nothing to do with it. The prior board changed policy, but now we are moving to the main role of a board from a governance standpoint, and that is holding the administration accountable for achieving the real change that will make the difference in the students' lives. And that accountability function is absolutely a board function. We are looking at specific measurables to hold the administration accountable for, and we're going to be implementing them and announcing them in the course of the next year. We're working collaboratively with our director, of racial equity initiatives. And so the bottom line is, a lot has actually changed, but now the rubber is hitting the road. The administration is beginning to implement, and the board is taking very seriously its responsibility to monitor and hold accountable. And hopefully a lot of the negative experiences that you are seeing on a regular basis with the students you work with, we will eliminate in the very near future. It is a heavy lift. It's not going to happen overnight. I don't sell snake oil, but the process is moving in an incredibly positive way, and it is night and day from where it was under the old administration.
All right, this is the last thing I'll say because I'm taking up a lot of time. But I've been living in Oak Park for 6 years, and I'm not going to go to another committee or another dialogue. I had to drag myself to this one because students wanted me to come and accompany them. But understand that in Oak Park, there is a trend to exploit, especially people who have knowledge, parents that have knowledge around education, around equity, around racial justice. We get pulled into tons of committees and dialogues, but nothing ever really happens. So I'm done working with the adults. I'm dedicating 100% of my time to the youth organizers. And I don't think that that's, to me, you all know the issues, you all know the problems. People have been bringing this up for many, many years, 30 years, many generations. It's time to do more action and to stop going so slow. So as much as you think that things are going in a positive directions, I'm telling you that the most marginalized students do not feel that change.
Thank you. Before you come up, hold on. Sir, were you in line? Okay, good. Okay, this young lady in the end.
Good evening. My name is Paula Adams, and I have a sophomore here at Forest High School. And I'm listening to the conversation.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. My name is Paula Adams, and my son is a sophomore here at Oak Park River Forest. And you know, I was sitting there thinking about what the young lady just said. And my son has experienced some of the things that she's talking about. And I thought to myself, perhaps I can shed a little light. Maybe I can enlighten you folks a little. Because I think it's important that you understand what our children are going through. I can only speak from my son's experience, okay? And I'll tell you a story first, okay? And it won't take long. So our son had an experience where he rode the school bus, not here at Oak Park, but you know, I think it's across the board what's happening to black and brown children throughout the United States. And so he rides the yellow school bus for the first time in his life, right? He's in 4th grade, and this particular day he came home, well, he got off the bus, and I met him at the bus, and when he got off the bus, he was holding his breath as though he couldn't breathe, right? And I'm trying to find out, well, son, what's wrong? What's going on? And he tells me that on the bus there was an older boy, 8th grader, and here he is, he's a 4th grader. And apparently he was sexually harassing a young lady on the back of the bus, and she kept saying, stop, stop. Now the bus driver is too busy driving, but my boy, who is he's a 4th grader, he gets up and he tells him, did you not hear what she said? She said stop, right? So the older boy gets up, and he told my son, he says, I'm your elder. So he topples him to the ground and knocked his head into the ground of the bus, right? And so this is where I meet him basically trying to catch his breath because he was accosted, right? So I take him home, and as his mother, right, I'm thinking, this is terrible, right? So the next morning we go to the school, and my husband and I, and we were going to press charges against the young man who had hurt our son, right? And in the process of talking to the principal at the school, you know, our children go through so much. Our son was hurt, but the child who hurt him was also being hurt, okay? And so, in talking to the principal, initially, we were going to press charges. We wanted to make sure that the police was called in. And the principal said, well, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Adams, there's so many black and brown boys already in prison, right? So he says, rather than suspending him or getting him arrested, So he sat down with us and he spoke to us about what can be done. We agreed that it would be best, rather than him being suspended and get to be sent home like he's on vacation. Well, the principal said he's going to have an in-house suspension where he will still have to do his homework. He still has to get his work done. He's going to be shadowing the principal around the school, but he will also help to clean the school. Right? So these were things that my husband and I, we agreed to. Because number one, we know that as parents, our son was hurt. We saw his hurt, okay? But we also have a heart to understand that another child, the same child that hurt him, is also being hurt at home in the environment that he's at. So, you know, there are tools. When we're talking about tools, we're talking about, you know, when you suspend a child and you send them home, they're not getting an education, okay? But when you suspend a child and you keep that child in school and you help him or her to understand that, look, there's accountability, okay? Therefore, you're going to be punished, but you're not going to be punished the way you think you want to be punished. Because a lot of times our children are so used to be beaten up, hit, slapped, you know, and these are the same things that they project to other individual children, okay? Because that's not the way we raise our son, but this is what he has experienced and he's been experiencing, even here at Oak Park, right? So for those children who, rather than suspend them and send them home, there must be another avenue for them to travel on, okay? They still have to be in the learning curve. They cannot be suspended and sent home on a vacation, right? Like they didn't, there's no accountability there.
I'm going to ask Dr. Moore, would you like to? I know you didn't ask a question, but would you like to respond?
As I'm sitting here and I'm listening to your comment, your experience, and can say, as a mother of 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls that went through District 97 and 200, so actively and emotionally invested in our kids, and knowing that race matters and that there are experiences that happen because of race. I'm also listening and having the experience as with a board member hat on, that each of you all that comes here as a parent and wants the best for your child, and entrusting your children to a school and a school district, what the role of our leadership, administration, teachers, custodial staff, everyone that's a part of this building, is to synthesize all of those needs and do what's best for all of our kids. So I'm hearing all of the concerns. I know that I brought my own, here. When my first year on the board, I had, my twins were freshmen. And in our some prior administrators, I was asking hard questions. I had my own little study of 2, taking the same classes, having very different experiences at times. Also could think back, 10 years ago, we're still talking about the same things. So those kind of struggles are the types of things that, as a board member, I bring to bear. And, that is why we've been pushing for restorative practices in our district, but done in the right way, because it cannot be a checkbox. It is about building community and building relationships. And totally agree with you that losing instructional time for a child means that if they're not here, they're not learning. And so how do we make sure that we keep our students here, but also keep all of our students safe, and building relationships and building respect and understanding how race and ethnicity and culture and class come to bear, not only for our students, but those interactions with students and adults. And it is hard, but, to Gina's point, our Culture, Climate, and Behavior Committee, our goal is culture and climate, because managing or even looking at, there's a difference between punishment and consequences. And consequences have to do with growing and learning, and that is what a school is supposed to be for. And that is our goal. And, it is frustrating because any of you all that have been to board meetings, it's not always pretty. There are hard questions, and we want what's best for our children and not for damage to be done. But if we look at individual instances, yes, those things are still happening. That's what we're working to bring to bear, that how can we change that? How do we ensure that all of our students leave this building every day feeling renewed and feeling themselves, that they have been able to be themselves? And it's a tall order, but it is what a school is supposed to be about.
And just to add to that too, not all parents can afford therapy for their children. And I think that it's very important. I think these are things that these children do need, is therapy. And it doesn't matter what color you are. I really don't agree with suspension from school for children at all. Because, that's taking away their time to learn. But I do think that there must be accountability, whether parents can be brought into the space so that they can be a part of the decision making with the school, with the principal, with the board, or whatever the situation might be. But the whole idea is to make sure that the child need is being met.
We agree with that.
That's very important.
Can I add something? Can I add something too? I just wanted to say thank you to you and your family for agreeing to be in that process, because there are families who do not choose that as an option and go ahead with the suspension and the full-on prosecution that in turn puts our students, especially black students, into the school-to-prison pipeline. But you did not do that, right?
Well,
You made a choice to support the long-term impact for this student, and this is why I keep coming back to the community, because the conversation is larger than just us sitting on this board. This conversation is larger because you made a decision as a community member to look at the long-term impact of what's going to happen for that child, the other child, not just your child. And as we're moving forward in our conversations as a community, we need to be looking at the long-term impact for all of our students. Now, the one other piece that I wanted to add about this is the importance of our educators becoming trauma-informed and understanding, right, the mental health supports that are required and needed, and our administration, and I know that they do a really great job of ensuring that there's professional development available for our educators on becoming trauma-informed educators. This is also a really important piece, and so it's not, although it's not necessarily our purview as a board, but when they're bringing us the information that they're implementing things that are supporting our students in ways that are really needed, it's encouraging for us as board members to be able to get behind that kind of support.
Not only that, but I think that it's important that our children feel loved, not only from parents at home. I think children will trust you when they know that you care deeply for them, when they know that you have their best interests at heart, and when they know that you see the greatness in each and every one of them, and that you expect them to exude that greatness. I think that's very important for our students, our children, to be able to see and identify. Very important.
Thank you. We got one person here, and then we got a couple people. They must go to different mics. Two people may want to go over there. Just state your name.
Can you guys hear me good?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Taylor, and I'm a freshman here at Opera, and I am one of the many youth that you guys are addressing tonight. And one of the interesting things that I heard was you guys referred to the table that you guys normally have set up as a barrier, and you guys chose to remove the table. So I just decided that tonight I would talk about some of the tables that I have faced at my time at O'Hara. So, me being a black girl here at O'Hara, I have been met with a lot of feelings of isolation when it comes from the volleyball team being one of the, 7 of 25 black girls on the team, being in my honors classes where I often find myself being another minority. There's just a lot of instances where I feel so alone, and even with my teachers, I do not have a single teacher of color across any of my honors classes, and I take all honors. So that is 5 periods a day where I do not see myself being represented as a adult figure. And I feel like a lot of times students, they come to these board meetings and they speak of this trauma and they speak of this isolation with the hopes that something is going to be done, and it's the same situation every year. So my question is just, I understand what we want to address, but how are we going to do that?
Mr. Kowski and Mr. Bishop.
So, your specific comment about teachers of color. Is this on? Yeah, okay. That is a significant concern and a clearly stated goal, but not an easy challenge. We've, through our human resources efforts, but also by trying to outreach and rather than have people come to us, go externally to try to build networks that will allow us to be an employer for teachers of color. We've talked about trying to grow our own, finding students who have an interest in teaching, and those are just a couple specific examples that have been put on the table to try to increase the teachers of color. Because you should have teachers that look like you in what you do. It's what you deserve.
And I would just add, first, kudos to you for coming up and speaking in the mic so well. And, just so we can hear you. And I'm hearing you on your concerns about feeling isolated and not represented. And that is what, over the years, from when I became a candidate 3 years ago running for this board, the number one step that can be taken to really help bridge the gap and to reach all students is to have faculty of color in greater proportion, and we're not there, and we're striving to be there. I know I don't leave it just to our able administration to recruit. I recruit as well. I'm confident others on our board do that as well. So I know there's a young lady in my church who's going to Wheaton, and she's doing student teaching right now, and I'm following up with her, reminding her. I don't know. I have no pull with those folks, but I do know that she's someone that would represent an effort, a step in that direction. And so I just wanted to empower everyone here, who regardless of obviously of their background, but especially if they happen to have some of the traits that we're looking for to help reach all students. And this isn't just about you, Taylor, it's about all students being to benefit. I didn't have an African-American teacher until I was 20. And so I still managed to turn out somewhat okay, but I know that I would have benefited from more diversity myself. So thank you for coming and sharing.
I feel as though, thank you, Taylor, I see myself in you, I see my daughters in you, and I can say one of my daughters didn't have her first black teacher until she was a freshman in college. And that is a child that grew up in this community. And so there is work to be done. And the isolation and the feelings of being the only are things that have to be addressed. And, our district has gone back and forth, 15, 20 years ago, there was an intentional effort to make sure that there was clustering of students so that black and brown students didn't have to be the only one in an honors or AP class. And that was during the time of my son. Things move off with different administrations, but we're back there now. And as a freshman, my, true desire is that, even as we're talking about the restructuring issues, I want you to hang in there. Your people are here, that even if it's not your teacher, that the adults that are here that look like you and may be able to reflect some of your experiences, that we make sure that you are availed of them as well, because we want your 4 years here to be what you need. And you made the first step. Thank you for even using the metaphor of our table and pushing that away for yourself, because your voice is so important and we're listening, and you will have a different experience. And that's part of the reason that we've even talked about, the restructuring. There's this suggestion that's come up about watered down curriculum and less rigor. And I can tell you plenty of extremely bright black and brown students that opted not to take honors or AP classes because they didn't want to be lonely. And so your brilliance is there, and we see it. And we're going to make sure that you feel included, and students that look like you feel that this is their school in every conceivable way. So thank you for being willing to trust it, to bring what you had tonight to us.
Thank you, Taylor.
Hi, my name is Joe Bellman. I have a couple of younger kids in the school district. And I have a question about a pilot program that I read about online. I don't know all the details around it. But my understanding is that a couple of years ago, there was a pilot program that the high school ran to try to address the opportunity gap in the freshman year, and they reached out, proactively identified incoming freshmen that elected not to take honors classes, but had a good chance at succeeding at honors classes. And talked to the kids, talked to the parents, convinced them to get into honors classes, and over the summer provided tutoring and training to get them on the on-ramp for honors classes. And my understanding is that a lot of those kids performed really well in those classes. And so I think my question is kind of twofold. One is, factually, is that even right? I just saw some report online. I don't know that much about it. And two is, factually, if that is right, if you could talk a little bit about the thought process around how it would benefit our kids more to, I want to frame this the right way, but it seems like the thought process is it would benefit our kids more to eliminate honors classes than to get more, like double down on that pilot program and get more kids into honors classes. But I'm probably thinking about that differently. So if you could address it factually, if that's right, and second, how you guys are thinking about that.
I'm going to give the board a context. I think he's speaking to the EOS program.
It's for AP classes.
That was for AP. And then the second part of his comment, I think, was with the new restructuring.
Well, if the program was working and we were getting more kids to be successful into honors programs than without the pilot, why wouldn't we do more of that?
So to go back, that was to get more students of color in the AP classes. And that was Equal Opportunity Schools Initiative. Did anybody want to speak to?
Can you just clarify? I think it would be helpful to make the distinction between honors and AP.
AP is advanced placement, and colleges will accept those credits. Honors is traditionally honors. The EOS program was to increase the number of students of color based upon not just academic performance, but rigor, perseverance, grit, and so forth into AP classes. And so that's still part of our work. The new curriculum alignment is to get more students of color into honors.
I guess that's where that's what I'm missing, I guess, is because I thought it was for incoming freshmen, and so
that's 2 years down the road.
Maybe I could share it, and if I'm wrong, I don't have the name of the program, I'll share it later. My understanding was it was for incoming freshmen, and they actually performed quite well. But again, if I'm factually incorrect on that,
I would suggest, raise your hand. Mr. Johnson can follow up with you on that to kind of clarify the difference.
But it was for AP classes, and it was for sophomores and juniors.
Mr. Phelan, if you would, like I said, these young people have been waiting on to speak as a group. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Charles, I'm a sophomore.
I'm Charlotte, I'm a sophomore. I'm Ellie, I'm a freshman.
We're members of It's Our Future, a youth climate It's Our Future, a youth climate advocacy group here in Oak Park, under 7 Generations Ahead. So we recently published an op-ed in the Wednesday Journal about why we are here and why we think the climate crisis is the most important issue our generation is going to face and hopes to ensure a livable future. So Gary, from seven generations ahead, recently spoke to, I don't know, some board members apparently about of the proposed renovated cafeteria under OPR Imagine, about having food scrap composting as part of that. So we're here to offer, if the renovation moves forward, about our insights about how to make the cafeteria the most sustainable that it possibly can be.
I'm going to allow the board to speak on recycling and energy. I received an email this weekend from maybe one of you about composting, and Mike Curiacho, see that gentleman back there? He is the one who will work with you, as well as Mr. Coonan. Okay. So yes, they're going to send me the proposal and present it to the board. Any other questions? Anybody want to speak about green energy? Mr. Eisen?
Sure. I guess in response to your thoughts, I mean, I guess I would agree with you that, you know, the sustainability of our environment is a huge issue for us going forward. And one of the things that we recently did as a board, I think the last meeting or meeting before, was we did approve a green energy program, which honestly is important, but it's not sufficient. And one of the things that we did request and we are going to talk about as a board is creating a sustainability program. And we think now is a really ideal time to do that because we're going to make a lot of changes to this building. And we want those changes to embed some of these sustainability issues. And so those are core to the upcoming investment that we'll make.
Thank you.
So we came up with a couple of ideas for things that we could do to make the cafeteria more sustainable in the school. And most of them make the overall place more closer to being zero waste. First off, styrofoam trays are really devastating to the environment. And I know that one of the reasons that they use them is because of washing purposes of the plastic trays. And so during the making of the cafeteria, if there could be more energy efficient or larger washing machines to make it so that the styrofoam trays are not necessary anymore, that would be really good. And then also, there are a couple of refill water stations in the school, but there is not one in the cafeteria, which is not good because there are kids who buy plastic water bottles every single day at lunch. And that is expensive for them in the long run and also really bad for the environment. Also, in the food options in the cafeteria, there are only 2 vegan options, which are fries and pasta. And those are not very healthy, but also not very sustainable. So if there could be more vegan options or locally sourced foods, which I know is a big ask, but also. And then most importantly is composting, which I know that we've already covered, but I know that there's already a composting system behind, like in the non-student section of the cafeteria, but if it was possible to implement it in the student section, that would decrease waste by a lot.
And as the climate crisis becomes more urgent, we think not only would this be like much better and make our school more sustainable, but it would also be a good way to educate the students as they need to learn how to be more sustainable in their lifetimes. And right now, as the new cafeterias are being constructed, it's the perfect time to make our cafeteria as environmentally friendly as possible.
Thank you very much.
Could I ask that all of their suggestions, fantastic suggestions, get to Mike, and Mike gets them to the architects? Okay. He's telling me he's got it.
And that water station, I feel like I'm learning, thank you, I've learned some things tonight I did not know. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name's John Phelan. It's nice to meet all of you. And I actually have two things I want to ask about. One is about the freshman curriculum restructuring, and the other is about the expiration of the 2 TIF districts and your intent about capturing the additional revenue from those properties. So, starting with the first about the freshman curriculum restructuring, I might have missed it, but I haven't heard any debate on whether to do the freshman curriculum restructuring. I was there at the opening meeting on August 22nd when the administration first proposed it. I was there again on October 24th because after the community meetings, I had seen statistics about Evanston and I had not seen the negative statistics about Evanston, so I made a public comment and pointed them out. And I heard you all say, well, we're not Evanston, and I understand we're not Evanston. I looked at my mail this morning and made sure of that. But the question I have is, you know, one of you posted on Facebook this weekend a quote from Doris Goodwin-Kearns who said, we need to allow dissenting voices to be heard without fear of retaliation. Yes, it was Mr. Martiri. And yet I've heard no dissenting voices on that question. And when it gets, when facts that would argue against it being done come up, they seem to be not included in the presentations. And when one of the speakers earlier tonight started asking questions and doing a great job of advocating as to why it might be a dubious choice, they were told to talk to administrator offline. I think the community needs to hear the debate on whether this should happen, not just the debate on how it should happen. And I've been asking for a long time, you know, Mr. Martiri said we want to be the school that everyone emulates after we do this. I want to know what school we are emulating. Who has done this, done it successfully, done it well, and what are we doing to emulate what they have done? Because the examples people bring up, all we hear is, oh, that's not us, we don't have control over them, we're going to do it. If this is just an experiment, if it hasn't worked, and we just want to try it because we think it's important, at least be straightforward about that. But I do think I'd like to hear, has there been any debate on whether we should do that? And what was the back and forth? What was the opposing side? And then the simple question with regard to the expiring Madison Street and downtown Oak Park TIF districts, there's going to be a decision whether or not to capture the new tax that's coming online then. We have a fund balance. I'll tell you, we've been trying to get rid of it for a long time without just irresponsibly spending it. And so I'm interested in this board's viewpoint on what they think we ought to do with that new property coming online.
I'm going to ask Ms. Spivey first to respond on curriculum, and then Mr. Martiri, you raised your hand about the Facebook, so I don't know if you want to comment. And then I'm going to ask Mr. Kofsky and Mr. Isley if you want to respond to the TIF question.
Hi, John. How are you?
Good, Sarah. How are you?
Good. So you raised a very valid point, and we've had this conversation before over tea. But I think you're right. I think we're in a position right now where we're still learning and assimilating facts and gathering additional ideas about how to best, how to best do this to make sure that we're acting in the best interest of all of our students. I mean, certainly none of us joined this board to say, forget those kids, I'm only caring about these kids. I mean, that's clearly not where we're coming from, and we want to make sure that we're doing our best by every single student. Sometimes those decisions are really hard to figure out, but we're trying to do that every day. That being said, I think that's what this first year is about, right? Like we're doing this pilot program to see how the implementation is going, to make sure that there are any hiccups that we experience are addressed and debated. But I also think that we're going to be hearing more about this in the coming months from the administration with a more formal presentation to the board. So I'm not sure that the time has actually come for the debate that I think that you're suggesting or wanting.
So there's still open-minded a decision to be made about whether to do this, not just how to do it.
I mean, I certainly am still learning, and as I continue to learn, I will continue to keep an open mind to make sure that whatever decision I make, whatever decision I articulate is what I think is in the best interest of all of our students. So I'm definitely not at the point where I've learned everything or know enough right now as I sit here to be fully confident in that assessment, but I'm continuing to learn to make sure that I make what I feel to be the best choice.
And Jeff, how are you? You're looking good.
Not as good as you.
So, when this was first brought up at a board meeting, a number of questions were asked, and I believe Greg was the one that was on the hot seat at the time about, is this going to be a watering down of curriculum and all, et cetera, et cetera. And so the administration responded to all those, but they were asked. And as that process evolved, we at the board came to understand that this was one of the administration's recommendations to us on how to really realize the system change needed to get to the point where we attain what we want at our school, and that is one that's good for all students, irrespective of race, etc. And the rationale provided certainly comported with the research, and so that's what was compelling to me to be supportive of it. I think I forwarded most of that to you, but in particular, Eric Honyushek's research, because Eric from the Stanford University is a critic of most more progressive education reforms. He's anti-union, he's pro-charter, he's a relatively conservative educational thinker. And he did this meta-analysis of the implementation of these types of programs, focusing on differential in student outcomes between heterogeneous environments, which is the one we are moving to, and homogeneous environments. And he actually found a statistically meaningful advantage overall with the heterogeneous environments in student performance, and a slight disadvantage actually in the homogeneous environment, even for the most gifted kids. So when the administration makes a recommendation to the board about a change